Well, good afternoon, good morning, good where you are. It's great to have you guys join us. I'm going to give a little bit more time for some of the final attendees to join in, and then we'll get started. So we'll just give it about another 30 seconds, and then we'll get started. All right, I think that's enough time. Looks like we have quite a few people joining us today, which is always nice and exciting. Uh, this is essentially one of our live demo series. We do this about every 2 weeks where we give a demo of what it is that Domotz does, how it works, and we really try to help answer any questions that you may have from a technical perspective. Let's go over a few housekeeping items fairly quickly. This is a GoToWebinar session. If you guys are having any audio problems, definitely try to switch back and forth between computer audio or phone, depending on how you're listening. I think most of us understand this nowadays, given the last 6 months of our world dealing with so many online services. One thing I do want to point out is we've got a team of people standing by to answer questions. Please leverage the questions section of the control panel for GoToWebinar, and we will try to get to those during the presentation. If they're relevant to what we're talking about, we'll address it right then and there. Otherwise, we'll try to get to them at the end. And then if there are any questions that are maybe outside of the webinar itself, like if you have business related questions, feel free to email sales@domotz.com. Or I should modify this as well to say, please email support@domotz.com. So on our agenda today, we're really going to give a demonstration of the general functionality within the Domotz service. As I mentioned, we've got a team standing by to help answer questions both on the sales and support side. So use that window for asking questions. And then I always like to ask everybody to give us feedback too. So if there are things that you hear that we could do better or maybe focus a little bit differently, by all means, please do that. We've got Giancarlo, our CTO, online with us today. So he'll be able to, he's kind of standing in the background helping answer some of the questions, but I'm hoping he'll chime in whenever a question comes up that's relevant to the presentation. And then we also have Jordan, who's on our, helped us get this thing set up. In fact, I think he's going to throw out the first poll that we want to do. Go for it, Jordan. Yeah. You guys can answer some of these polls as we go through. It really helps us steer some of the demo that we're doing towards points that may be relevant to your industry. So, or to whatever it may be there, whether you're used Domotz or not before. So bear with us as we go through that. So that being said, and while you guys are filling out that poll, let's go ahead and get started. Fundamentally, I like to let people know what is the core value proposition of Domotz, just so we're all on the same page. Domotz is really a network, or a remote network and monitoring and management tool. The idea behind this is how can we help you as a service provider or you as an integrator be more efficient in how you run your business? How can we help you provide proactive support and monitoring of the systems that you're installing to your customers? And then first and foremost, I guess I want to say that we're a secure platform that helps you manage these systems. And by all means, we want to help you be more efficient by helping you not only deploy systems faster, but also be able to respond to issues and errors that are out there. Looks like we've got, I'd say roughly a third that are service providers. We've got a third, a little over a third that's on the integration side, and then some that are really associated with IT departments and residential integration, so probably home automation systems or home theaters, which is great. We have a very diverse group, which is awesome. You know, the idea behind Domotz is really to help provide you, regardless of what your business is, like I said, with more efficiency and really help generate what I would consider to be customer loyalty through, whether that's, you know, through SLAs, right, service level agreements you have in place, or through just helping them make sure their systems don't go down. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, let's go back to the start page. So when you first log into a Domotz system, we'll talk about the different components within the systems here. But when you first log in, you really see this NOC-like view, the Network Operations Center view. It's a multi-tenant view. This application comes in the form of desktop apps, whether you're dealing with Mac or Windows. It also comes in the form of mobile applications. So for a lot of service providers, they're intrigued to find out that we have a mobile app as well that you can take with you regardless of where you are. That can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on what you want to get out of life. The other major part of the Domotz infrastructure is the cloud. We are fundamentally a cloud service, and it's the cloud that resides. A lot of people ask, which cloud service do we use? It's Amazon Web Services. We have two major cells throughout the world. And then, of course, within each region throughout the world, we've got lots of tentacles to make sure that not only the system is stable, but that performance meets your need, whether you're down in Australia or the Asia Pacific region, or if you're in Europe or in Africa, we have different cells that are out there. The third major part or component within the Domotz platform really is the network agent. There's a single network agent that resides on the local area network that you are monitoring. And it is that network agent that is taking commands or receiving commands from the cloud. And those three components, the application, the cloud, and the agent, are really what makes up the Domotz ecosystem itself. And we'll be talking about that today. Let's talk about what you see on the screen here. This NOC view, this Network Operations Center view, is meant to be really simple to understand. It is a multi-tenant view, so you can have tens, hundreds, even thousands of agents deployed and showing on this map. Simple red, yellow, green type status. So a red agent means that the agent itself is no longer communicating with the cloud, likely due to power outage. It could be due to the ISP being down right now. In fact, interestingly enough, Giancarlo and I were talking about this just about an hour ago. Right now, we see a lot of down agents on the East Coast of North America due to the tropical storm or hurricane that's going up the East Coast. So we see a lot of. Go ahead, Giancarlo. What were you saying?
A lot of outages due to the storm up there. And
yeah. So, go ahead.
That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When an agent is green, it typically means that everything's working as we expect. Where it gets interesting is when an agent turns yellow. Usually it's because there's an important device that either Domotz is classified or you as an integrator have classified as being offline, or there could be security vulnerabilities that are exposed there. So this multi-tenant view that you have here is really meant to give you a high-level overview about where all the sites that you've deployed, what their status is. Let's go into the dashboard itself. So when you click on a particular agent, you get out of that multi-tenant view and you're focused on what is happening within that network itself. When you click on it, we do an immediate refresh on what are all the states of the devices that are out there. And within this, you kind of see basically from a network infrastructure perspective what's going on. Let's talk a little bit about how the Domotz agent itself gets activated and how it starts. When you first deploy an agent and you insert your username and password, the very first thing that it does is it starts scanning the network for all the available devices out there. From a technical perspective, we're doing a layer 2 scan. We're doing essentially ARP requests to find out what devices, what MAC addresses are actually out on this network. Then we leverage the power of our sister company, which is Fing, to enrich the information. So when we look at a particular device, let's pull this one up. What we do is we not only find the MAC address like we talked about, but we look at the layer 3 side of it and put the IP address. We look at all the application layer protocols that may be broadcasted by that particular device, and we display that. We also do our best to put make, model, and type associated with this particular device. The type actually becomes really important for service providers. When they're out assessing what a network looks like within a particular business, being able to understand whether you're dealing with security cameras or automation systems or digital signage or point of sale systems becomes a very powerful tool for you when it comes down to how are you going to manage this network with your clients. So Domotz does this discovery of all these devices. And if we go to, let's go to the rack room here, PQR, yeah. We'll look at some of these network switches, because when we start to look at the network infrastructure, that's when things I think really become interesting. As we scan all the devices and classify them like we talked about, we start to look at what are the types of devices. And when we see network infrastructure devices, we go a little bit deeper. In fact, on all, I should say on all devices, we're going to scan for which ports are available and open for management. Common ports are Telnet, SSH, web ports like port 80, port 443. If you want to create, or if you know of custom ports that need to be added for a particular device and management, you can add those here as well. Or you can create what we call TCP tunnels to do direct connection. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. The one thing with respect to network infrastructure devices is we're going to leverage SNMP, so Simple Network Management Protocol, to understand of all the devices we've discovered, what ports are they located on these managed switches. We'll even go further to look, and usually looking at cameras, it's a little bit more interesting. We'll even look at the bandwidth associated with these particular devices as seen by that managed switch. We'll look at that over time. We'll look for errors or discarded packets that are being dropped by the switch itself. We'll even, in fact, on the camera, this is a great example, we look at PoE. So we look at what is the power being consumed by that device or by that endpoint on that particular switch. And as you can see, we also give the ability to control these devices or power cycle them. I often bring it up at the end, but it's important to note while we're talking about PoE, we also will discover PDUs or power distribution units, and we will classify those devices as well, and then we'll show configurations for them. So an example would be something like Surgex is one here, where we have a PDU, and we can show the outlets, and we have the ability to assign the network devices that we've discovered, or we can create dummy devices and put them on there if they're not network, but we want to be able to power cycle them. This gives us the ability to then manage devices from a resetting perspective or a power cycling point of view. So I just wanted to point that out while we're here. Going back to the network infrastructure, once we have discovered all the devices, once we've looked at the network infrastructure, we make available this topology map. This topology map really helps you as the service provider or the integrator better understand how all the devices in the environment are connected to the various components that are there. If we look at a particular device, let's actually look at this wireless access point. We can click on that and better understand, what's the information associated with this device. In the case of an access point, we can actually click on it and see exactly which clients are connected. We can show a lot more detail. This is for systems, more advanced WAPs like Ruckus or Ubiquiti or Cisco Meraki, where we can see the device, which radio it's connected to, what the SSID is, which channel. Even if we click on a particular device, we can go in and see things like RSSI values, the signal strength associated with that particular device. This is really beneficial to help understand if you have network performance problems on those devices. Speaking of performance, one of the things you may notice here as well is that we also show things like round trip delay for every single device. So Domotz will query every single device on the network through pinging, right? So we're looking at the network performance of that particular device as seen by the agent. Here you'll see, this is a wireless device, I think it was a Peloton that I was looking at. So here you can see what the average network performance is to this wireless device. Round trip delay and latency is generally not a bad thing unless it's varying greatly. So if you're dealing with an audio video distribution device or voice over IP systems or even unified communications in general, when you have latency on the network to a particular device that is varying, that's when you run into problems. You lose packets, you have jitter, that occurs, which causes problems. Domotz allows you to set up alerts and evaluate those types of behaviors that are happening on the network. So one of the questions that we often get around these systems and looking at devices is, do I have the ability to look across VLANs, or do I have the ability to look across subnets? The answer is absolutely. So Domotz fundamentally works at a layer 2 level, which is really associated with VLANs. You absolutely can configure the Domotz agent to look across these VLANs. We provide instructions on how to do that. Depending on whether you're using a Windows executable for the agent, or depending on whether you're using the Domotz black box, we provide instructions on how to help you configure the system for looking across multiple VLANs. So we can do that. And then if you want to not be scanning certain VLANs, but you want to look at specific IP addresses that maybe are on a different subnet, you absolutely can do that. A great example, in fact, Giancarlo and I were talking to a customer today about this, where they want to monitor point of sale systems. The best thing you can do with respect to point of sale systems is put them on a separate subnet and then monitor the IP address of those particular devices. So Domotz allows you to do that natively, so that we're not necessarily scanning, like doing ARP requests of that, but you can still ping particular devices and connect to them as appropriate. And lastly, I'll mention this. You'll notice actually at the very top of my list, we have external hosts that we can monitor. So if you're in a situation where, let's actually take the work from home situation. So if you are servicing a client that is requiring you to manage an executive's home network, it's very easy for you within a Domotz agent to set up the ability to ping, whether it's back to the home office or ping other services that that executive may be using, to make sure that they're functioning properly from an agent's perspective or a Domotz perspective. That's some of the things that you can do. You can even look at particular like round trip delay and the latency from that agent out to that service as well. So these are just some tidbits and things to think about here. Let's talk a little bit about secure connectivity. So once we've discovered all these devices, mapped out the topology, one of the things that I think you're going to want to do is be able to understand how you can manage these systems. We talked before about how we discover the ports that are available. I'll go back to these switches here. I just like it because people understand how to connect to the network infrastructure. When we create a connection to that device directly, what we are doing is we are creating a secure tunnel between my laptop, or the laptop that you're on, and our cloud. And then we're taking and creating a separate connection from the cloud back into the network that we're monitoring. We use things like these secure keys. Even if you were to copy and paste this to your laptop or to even a colleague's laptop that's in the same office, it will not work. So it's associated to the PC or laptop that you're connecting to, or even the mobile device that you're connecting here. Once that connection is established, you can see that we're now in the setup page of this particular device here. And so now you can go in and configure whatever it is you may want to configure around that device, whether you're trying to do VLANs for a particular system, or you're trying to change SSIDs in a WAP, or you're trying to get in and manage a firewall. Whatever it may be that you're trying to do, you can easily do that remotely and securely through the Domotz cloud infrastructure. The other option that you have is, if you want to use, in fact, because we have commercial integrators and even some residential integrators, I'll point out the fact that if you're connecting to control systems or lighting systems that use the manufacturer's software or tools, you may want to establish what's called a TCP tunnel to a particular device. This is important because you can connect to a very specific port of that device that the third-party software uses to communicate with things like controllers or whatever else in order to program the system or do firmware updates. So Domotz allows for you to create that tunnel through the Domotz infrastructure for those devices and systems. Another way in which you can connect to Domotz is actually through what we call VPN on demand. In the example I showed where we connected directly to a device or we created a TCP tunnel to a device, it only allows your laptop to communicate directly with that device. That can be good for security reasons. It can be good for privacy concerns. But if you need to connect to multiple systems on the network at the same time or multiple devices of the same system, let's say you wanted to do firmware updates to a bunch of touchscreens that were throughout the office or throughout the location, the site that you were managing, you would want to use something like VPN on demand. I'm not going to do it here because we're in a webinar and we don't want to create a specific tunnel at this point. But when you do open up a tunnel, you essentially get a secure configuration file that you can download into your VPN client of choice. And then what happens is that the Domotz agent itself acts as a secure server, a VPN server, and it's a temporary connection. The nice thing about this is it essentially does place your laptop or even your mobile device directly on that network, so you can then make mass edits or updates to systems and see all of the IP addresses associated with the networks you're monitoring there. So this is a nice, powerful tool that you have as a user through us. Oh, one thing I should mention about this, and in fact, it's probably a good segue, and I don't spend enough time talking about this, but when it comes to these types of connections, one of the beauties of working with VPNs here is that you're using the team members that you create within the Domotz ecosystem. You're not creating a common username and password. So if you have a team of technicians that you know need access to the various sites, you set that up within Domotz and through the Domotz team management system. You can take advantage of things like two-factor authentication to make sure that it is your team and it is the individual that should be getting on there that's getting on there. So I just wanted to bring that up as well and make sure I mentioned it. So we've talked about how the devices are discovered. We've talked about how you can now manage a lot of the devices. Let's focus a little bit on that proactive monitoring, the alerting that happens. This is actually an extremely powerful tool or feature, I should say, within the Domotz service. A couple different ways I want to frame this up. First of all, the types of events that can trigger alerts. At a large level, a large scale level, we have agent alerts. And we talked about that before, but when an agent goes from green to red or has a vulnerability associated with it, maybe on the security level, we can generate what I call agent events. Those events can be pushed to your mobile device through the mobile application. You can generate email alerts to the account that you're logged in as. Or more importantly, and I think this is where a lot of service providers and integrators really see the power of Domotz, is that you can use what we call shared alerts. And I'll talk about that in a second. In the same vein, each individual device that's on the network, or even for, as you can see, the host IP addresses, we can generate alerts on those. So if I come down here and let's select my phone. If you want to generate alerts based on when that device goes up or down, or if the IP address of that device changes, you can generate alerts on that. For more advanced systems, and in fact, why don't we do this? Let's go, Giancarlo and I were just talking about some of this today. If we go to things like Cisco, and we'll look at this main switch here, we can set alerts on various things, such as if the configuration files within the device change. We can also set up sensors through SNMP. So if we want to look at very specific variables, like has the device been rebooted for whatever reason, we can actually use what we call eyes or SNMP sensors to go and create alerts on these things. So we think that this is a very useful tool for you. In the case of systems like PCs, laptops, or host servers, you may want to be monitoring things like RDP or remote desktop protocol. You can do that through what's called TCP services. Another great example is if you're dealing with automation controllers. A lot of times you want to be checking that the web server that's associated with those automation controllers are online so you can monitor port 80 or port 443 as appropriate. So these are some of the things that you can do within each individual device. I'll also point out, like we talked about, if a device's network performance starts to deteriorate or the latency starts to change or we're losing packets, you can generate alerts. Very, very useful for voice over IP systems if you're monitoring those types of things. So I wanted to point some of those specifics out on these particular events. While I'm on the subject of SNMP sensors and eyes, let's talk a little bit about some of the latest features that we've added over the last couple of weeks. We've always had the ability to look at SNMP sensors, but now what you see is we're actually starting to log these. So we can capture over a 30-day period the sensor values, and we can graph them for you. So very useful when it comes to temperature monitoring, very useful when it comes to things like uptime. In fact, even on this, you can see recently we had some changes to this system where we brought it down and we were manipulating it, but you can see how the uptime reset for us. So very useful addition. One thing that you're going to see in the next few, in fact, I believe it's tomorrow, Giancarlo, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Did I click on my?
That's correct. That's correct.
Here we go. I wanted to, let's see if we can show this. As always with good live demos, right? Let's see what we see here. So let's go to, this is on our servers, excuse me, on our development environment, but tomorrow you should see some of this stuff getting added. We have now the ability, and eyes and SNMP sensors have always been kind of difficult for people to manage. But what you're going to see as of tomorrow is the ability to search across particular variables and have the OID brought up natively within the tables. So then you can get a description of what it's doing. This is based on the MIBs that are provided by the manufacturer. And then you can add these as appropriate to what you want to trigger off of. So we think this is going to be a really powerful feature that you see in the next few days show up within Domotz. Giancarlo, is there anything specific you think we should say about this other than that?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You are perfectly right. So if you click on the blue button at the right, the Domotz agent will automatically retrieve the current values that you might have on that table, and then you can add all of them or just one or whatever. This will be released in production tomorrow. From the backend point of view, it will require an agent upgrade, which will be rolled out automatically in the next few days. So I would say by next week, early next week, we will have all the fleet of Domotz agent upgraded automatically for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm super excited about this feature because we've had a lot of requests for how we can improve really the acquisition of OIDs, and I think that the team did a great job with this. So I know that also on the roadmap, Giancarlo, we're adding, call it some intelligence to where as we start to see more and more particular sensors being added for certain types of devices, that we will elevate that to the top of the list. So that'll be really nice for people. So getting back on track here, I get excited with these new features. So getting back on track, as we see all the different types of events that can trigger alerts, I mentioned that there's this notion of shared alerts, and I want to talk about that. Shared alert, actually, let's get out of, I don't know why I'm looking at it in the demo environment. Let's go look at it in the real environment. When we go to shared alerts, so what you see here is the ability to integrate natively with certain types of what we call channels. So PSA tools, so professional service administration tools, also a lot of people call it ticketing systems, can be added within the environment. We can go to what we call webhook based systems. So things like Slack or Microsoft Teams, where you're getting push notifications or real-time alerting when an event occurs. We integrate natively with those. we also can, rather than going to the personal email address that you're logged into, you can set up general emails that you could go to. So example would be support@mailchimp.com or support@mycompany.com. Maybe it's something like a ticketing system at mycompany.com that you can push notifications or real-time events and alerts to, and do whatever it is you need to do in order to prioritize it. One of the nice things about the native integration that we do with ticketing systems is that we can automatically open up tickets based on events, and then we use a lot of intelligence to say if a ticket is already opened on a particular event, but that event occurs again, what we do is we don't open up a new ticket. What we do is simply append the current one with the new information and essentially add logs. Likewise, if a ticket gets closed because the event was resolved, but later on the same event occurs and opens up a ticket again, we actually append the historical information and historical ticket information along with that new ticket. So there's a lot of nice things that we do with respect to these PSA tools. In the future, you'll see us integrating with documentation systems. Services like IT Glue is a great example where we're working on that. And then you'll see us also interfacing with more traditional RMM tools as well, allowing that traditional RMM tool, especially from an asset management, extract a lot of the information that we have through the device discovery that we do. So I'm really excited about what we're doing, and I think you guys will find that the shared alerts is an extremely powerful feature within the Domotz platform. Let's talk a little bit about network security. You can see here on our lab, we've got some security issues that are found. I want to touch base on this just briefly. Domotz does not claim to be a security operations center. We're really managing the network infrastructure and helping you monitor that. But what we do want to provide you with is, especially as an integrator, right? Somebody who's installing systems into other businesses or business environments, or even into residential applications, right? We want to let you know what we as a cloud service see going on in the network. So from the cloud perspective, right? So from the Amazon Web Services side, looking back into that network, do we see any ports that are open at the router or the firewall level? And if we do, we want to alert you to that. The reason we're alerting that information or providing that information to you is because we see that as a potential vulnerability there. And we want to make sure you're aware of it. You'll have the option to either mark that port as safe or to reject it with the assumption that you're going back in and fixing it. If you reject it, we're going to scan it again the next day. And if we see it, we're going to bring awareness to you on that. We do the same thing from the inside. So when we are looking, or when the agent itself is looking at all the devices that are on the network, we're looking for UPnP. UPnP is a rather old, let's call it legacy technology. Most people disable UPnP server functionality. Sometimes it's required depending on the types of devices that you're using, but when possible, you should just disable UPnP is our feelings. That being said, if we discover that devices are gaining access to the internet through UPnP, we bring awareness to that and we show you. Again, it's about how do we let you as a service provider know that there's a device on the network that is potentially exposing a hole in your network. The last thing that you saw here on this is what we call default password checking. I do want to point out that the account that I'm using here is in beta, and you will not see this default passwords check. But just to give you an idea of what we're doing here, we are, for all of the devices that we have what we call drivers for, we are checking to ensure that we're checking to see if they're using the default username and passwords. You can imagine that if a port was open to a device that is using the default username and password, that is a massive vulnerability in your system, and it's a hacker's dream. So we try to, again, show you which ports are open, show you which devices may be using default username and passwords. I do want to point out that this default password checking that we're doing here, while it's not available yet, We're continuing to work on this and optimize this for the systems. We're hoping that it's available in the next few, probably few quarters, I should say. But I'm excited by this, and I think it's really helpful. So that's what we do with network security and this particular tab. Let's talk a little bit about reporting and logging. So when we are monitoring the networks and when you're managing these things, you're setting up alerts, trying to be proactive for your customer, we feel that one important aspect that helps you, or at least helps your clients better understand what it is you're doing for them, is through reporting. Within Domotz, you see a couple things here. One is logging. Every type of activity that happens by your team members into a particular agent or into the account gets logged. So here you can see, just from right now doing this demo, I've logged into these particular devices. You can see how I've done, I've gone to port 80. It shows the date, the time, who did it. Here, one of my colleagues did a VPN tunnel into the system. So we log that and capture that information. This is really useful for you as a service provider or integrator and owner of the company to better understand who's getting into what systems, as well as just logging the types of activities that go on. It is important to note that although these names or these logs occurred, we can't see exactly what happened once they went into a particular device or a port. The reason being is because the way the data is encrypted and how it is secure. The way you should leverage this, though, is that if something happened on a particular site after somebody made an access to it, at least you know who you can go back to and talk to about what happened and what changes occurred there. So this is very, very useful. As it relates to your customer and the information you should provide, the assumption I have here in this statement is that you probably have some sort of service level agreement in place with your clients. If you have a service level agreement in place, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever it may be, I believe it's good for you to touch base with your customer on a regular basis, even if nothing bad, or even if like systems or services did not go down, you should still let your clients know what's going on in their system. It helps you when it comes time to renew that service level agreement. So what you can do within Domotz is create reports. You can send them to email addresses as appropriate, but you can pick the contents that you want to add to those particular reports. If you don't feel like you need to do WAN performance and showing that in the graph, you can turn that off. If you want to sort the types of devices or turn off particular devices so that the clients don't see it, you can do that. One of the things you can do just to help your world and make you a little bit more efficient is you can actually generate these automated reports on the first of each month and have them sent directly to either your team or a particular customer or email address as appropriate. One of the things that I didn't show you, and I'll show it to you now that I wanted to, is within this tab too, you have the ability to export all the devices in the network to a CSV file. I should also point out, and I will say that this is really useful for asset management reasons if that's needed for you. But one thing I meant to mention, and I did not do it, is when you're using the Domotz desktop app, and once we've discovered all these devices, you actually have the ability within the desktop app to export this device list to an Excel file. So this is generating a file. Let me just save it to the desktop. Let me go find it on my desktop here real quick. Then I'll open it up. Here we go. I saved it to my downloads file. Sorry, not my desktop. I haven't opened up Excel. Usually I do this so it's a little bit faster when we're doing demos, but once this opens up, I'll bring it up on the screen. Here we go. And right there it is. So this essentially is an Excel file that shows all the devices, all their current IP address, MAC addresses, make, model, type, any notes that are associated with this. This becomes a very useful tool, especially if you want to do a mass update to all the different devices that are in the network. So for instance, we discover a lot of information about all these devices, but the two things that we can't discover yet is the actual location of those systems. So if you're dealing with a business and you know that you've got certain assets that are in a conference room, whether it's the unified communication system or smart displays, right, you need to be able to update those quickly. You can do all that through this Excel file and then upload that back into the Domotz system and automatically name it. Another example is if you wanted to, let's say, take and filter by all the different types that are out there. Okay, we can now look at all the different cameras. We can make edits to those. We can change their importance level. We can do all of that within this Excel file, save it, and then upload that back into the system so that it makes changes quickly and in one fell swoop, so to speak. So we've talked a little bit now about managing devices. We've talked about how to connect to them. We've talked about proactive alerting and how you can now do reporting. The last thing that I want to talk about, and this becomes as you start to scale with more and more Domotz agents and having more and more sites, how can you manage a lot of these systems more effectively? Well, within the last couple of weeks, we've released what we call our global manage feature. You'll see off to the left this new tag, but when you click on that, you have the ability to search across devices and or agents that are out there. So we have a lot of Cisco devices, so let's just type Cisco. What you'll see here is all the agents that are associated with my account that contain the word Cisco show up in this particular list. In fact, even if I go back and I type the word, let's say main, okay, you'll see any devices that have the word main in it show up, but even if I scroll down, you don't see the word main here. What's interesting is if I click on this device and go look at the details, you'll see that the bonjour name is actually listed as main. So we can really do in-depth searches on each of these devices to pinpoint the exact devices that we want to manage and deal with. Now, if I go back to that management tab, let's go back to Cisco, because I think this is where it becomes really useful when you're dealing with network infrastructure devices. So when I have discovered the devices that I care about and I've narrowed down the list to the ones I want to manage, I can click on the device itself. Now, let's say in this Draper Office Agent on a Box site, let's say I want to take the configuration that I have for this main switch and look at the settings and the properties, right? If I look at all this and I say, okay, this is the exact type of configuration that I want to push. You know what is it? Let me change something here. If I go to this switch, I think I have some eyes that are configured. Yeah, so here I have some SNMP sensors that are configured. Okay. If I want to take and replicate this particular switch onto any other switch or other devices, I can easily export this configuration file, right? Export these, and I want to be clear, export the device properties and settings as seen by Domotz, and I can save them on my laptop. Why is this beneficial? Well, the reason is that if I have a site that I want to replicate, or I have a template that I want to follow, this essentially allows me to do mass updates to all my sites with the push of a button. Once I select these devices, I can hit import configuration file. I can select that particular file, and then it gives me the option to be able to say, okay, I want to import the particular sensors. I don't want to import the names or room locations. So this is a really nice tool. In fact, let's just go for it. Let's export this to a file, that. So it should have saved it to my downloads. Then if I want to re-import this here, you'll see that it gives me the ability to exclude all this information because I don't feel like I need to change the make, models, and types of these, even though in this particular thing they are the same. So I'll just import the eyes, right? Those configuration, looking at the temperature. When we import that, so now all these switches have the same setup. And if I go into this particular switch, I will go into the switch. So here you can see that the internal temperature has now been registered there on this OID. So this is just one way to do mass updates to a lot of your systems. You can do the same thing across agents as well. So if you wanted to, it's probably, I think some of them are typed agent. Here's some agents that are here. I can set up shared alerts for agents that I own. Okay, I can push shared alerts across those things and make sure that all alerts are associated with the agents properly. And if I need to change, like, let's say you had a customer that had 10 sites, okay, and that one customer that they're, for some reason, they changed the name of their company, right? They went from company A to, company X. You could easily adjust those things at a mass level in here. So these are just some examples of way in which you can use global configurations. I think I've covered the bulk of what I wanted to do, or what I wanted to say. I did want to give an opportunity to Giancarlo to talk a little bit about some of the new features that are coming really soon. And I wanted to also talk about some of the integrations that are coming. While Giancarlo's talking about that, fill out this poll so you can help us, improve and understand what it is you're excited about. Giancarlo, are you there?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, GB. So you pointed already something that is coming tomorrow. It's strictly related to the SNMP configuration, and we are working in that direction. We are making the life of the service provider or the integrator to configure SNMP easier through Domotz, and this is coming tomorrow, together with another feature which will help distinguish. You did a good example before when you were using the global management capability for searching devices across all your site. You wrote the sentence main or something, and you find some devices where they had the name or Bonjour name or NetBeans name with main. So one thing we are adding again tomorrow is an advanced search capability which allows users to specify what you are searching for. So you can search main, and then through the means of this advanced configuration, you search main in the name rather than main in the vendor or main in the room or location. So that will be a filter. Yep.
Giancarlo, what a good example. I mean, there's a lot of Apple devices out there, but if you wanted to search for all the Apple devices but not the iPhones, will you be able to do that? Yeah, that's
yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah. And together with that, we will continue. This is not coming tomorrow. A little bit further, we will also allow to do some refinement search. Like I want to search all the Apple that have a specific name, but not this other name. So something like that will be also possible. Not tomorrow, but let's say in a few more weeks after that. We mentioned about the export of settings and properties. No, you can export and import settings through this panel as well. It's not possible yet, but is going to be available starting from tomorrow, is the possibility to set credential for multiple devices altogether. So we have some capabilities offered, we call them drivers to specific devices. And to trigger the driver, we need to have access to the device locally on the network, and to access to that device, we need to tell Domotz the username and password or any sort of credential to be able to connect to that device. And at the moment, you need to do that one by one. So imagine you have a site with 100 of security camera, and the OnVIF credential are all the same for all the 100 cameras. At the moment, you need to do that one by one. You need to unlock the security camera functionality one by one. So starting from tomorrow, you will be able to multi-select all of them and set the credential for all of them together. What is also important to notice or mention about what our team is focusing on is also in terms of security, making the user more aware of some of the security features which are there. It's not just, are probably marked as an alert capability rather than a security capability. So whenever there is a new, we constantly scan the network, every 30 seconds. So if there is a new device showing up on the network and you are not expecting those devices to show up on the network, you might receive an alert. You can configure Domotz to receive an email or push notification for that event. So we are going to add that capability into the security tile that JB was showing you before. This is some of the feature we are going to release very, very soon. As JB was mentioning, we are going to work also with other company in terms of integration. Integration with PSA tools like Fresh Service. So Fresh Service is also coming very soon as part of the integration. But we are very keen to work with other companies as well. So we are looking into company like Synchro, MSP, or ServiceNow, or Freshdesk, which is the other way of looking at Fresh.
And Giancarlo, you reminded me, and I usually try to mention this, but we always want to hear from our customers about what services that they're using or what third-party hardware they're using, so we can make sure we have drivers developed for them, make sure that the integrations that we do are effective and appropriate. So I definitely want people to email support@domotz.com and tell us what they're using, tell us what we can do and add to it. So you just reminded me of that, so thank you.
Yeah, very, very good point, JB. And speaking about the new integration, you showed the configuration management for the Cisco devices. So we are able to backup.
Did I not? I don't know that I talked about that, did I?
Yeah, probably not.
I know I talked about configuration, but this is an important aspect of what we do here.
Yeah,
I was looking at it before the demo just to make sure it was up and running, and it absolutely is. Do you want to speak to this, Giancarlo?
yeah, I was. No, go ahead. I will just.
All right.
Yeah.
So from a network infrastructure perspective, when we're looking at network switches, one of the things that we do is we look at the running configuration and we look at the startup configurations that are there. When we see a change to a running configuration, we can alert you to that. So if somebody's getting into the switch and manipulating, VLANs or manipulating the host names, whatever it may be, as in this case, we're going to flag that. We're going to save off the configuration files as they change. The other thing is that if we notice a misalignment between the running configuration and the startup configurations, we can alert you to that and we can bring awareness to that. The reason that this is so powerful is just one, if somebody's getting into the switch that you care about, making changes, you need to know about it. But the other thing is that if you've ever left a job site and you didn't save the startup configuration or the running config to the startup configuration, inevitably once a power outage occurs, you're doing a truck roll. So what we're providing is a tool to, one, bring awareness to what's going on, but also if you need to restore a configuration file remotely, you can. Even if you, to the point about templating, if you ever needed to replicate that configuration file, whether it was for a warranty issue or you just needed to kind of create a template based off of how you like to configure switches as a starting point, you can do that very easily here. So this is a powerful feature as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very good feature. I mean, everybody is aware of backupping data, which is on a PC, or backupping data, which is in a NAS drive, no? But we're not backing up. Usually, we're not backing up configuration that we do on the networking devices. And that's where Domotz comes in place, and that's basically a service that you can offer to your customers. So speaking about that configuration management, we are now supporting Cisco, both the SG series and the Catalyst series. We are going to support very soon firewall categories of devices. Names like WatchGuard or SonicWall or FortiGate are on the list. But we are also extending the support for configuration file on the switches, and we will soon release the support for Luxul devices. But we will then add Palo Alto and Juniper and HP as well. So those are all in the roadmap to be released soon. Last thing I want to cover in terms of roadmap, very quickly, we are all concerned about security. We are all concerned about how to secure access to a platform. And you spoke about two-factor authentication, so Domotz can be configured, your account can be configured with the two-factor authentication. And you can also see as an administrator who's in your team is using two-factor authentication to authenticate into Domotz. What we are going to do there is a way to force all the team members of your team to use the two-factor authentication. So here you see who is using and who is not, but we are going to allow you to force your team members to do that. But more importantly, we are integrating with and this comes, I mean, I'm jumping then to a sort of a list of questions I have. So John was asking if there is any single sign-on platform we integrate to, something like Microsoft AD or Okta. There is not at the moment, but we do have a proof of concept, or our backend has been engineered to support some, sorry for that, SAM 2.0. So by, I would say Q3 2020, we will have the support for Microsoft AD and Okta as a way to authenticate your employee to Domotz.
Yeah, that's that question. We've been getting that question a lot more, especially from service providers, Giancarlo. So having a single sign-on service, I think, will be really important for them, and we're definitely aware of that. So
yeah, absolutely. And so I had a few more questions. We have probably 4 minutes. So there was, can I shoot a couple? Okay, so William was asking, how do I handle 500 distinct networks through Domotz? And in each network there are, I mean, each network is basically a separate client, and we have tens of thousands of equipment or devices that we want to keep an eye on through to Domotz. So how do you do that? Basically, we have service provider that manage thousands of networks all together with Domotz. So the online, I would say the online sign-on through Domotz is very suitable for people that want to manage 300, 400 sites all in one single dashboard. If you want to scale above that, we have the capability of doing that. Just contact our sales team and we will provide you with more information for doing that, and scale up to, as I said, tens of thousands of networks that you can monitor through a single main account with Domotz. Okay, then Kenny was asking if we can share any information about how to export data out of Domotz to an analytics, like an analytics tool like Power BI. Yeah.
We always like to go to our APIs and have a discussion there, right, Giancarlo?
That's correct. Yeah.
So everything that I showed you today within the desktop app or in the mobile apps, right, are really built on Domotz's public APIs. So these APIs are available to you as a user, and we walk you through how to make these types of calls. Pick a call here, right? You can see how to do it, what the responses are. Fundamentally, our dashboard is built on these APIs. When it comes to reporting tools and understanding information, especially things like historical data, right? There are actually APIs out there for you to do those types of calls. So you can use these APIs to pull data into a database and then run that against, Power BI or whatever your dashboarding tool is that you care to use.
Yeah, very, very good.
Anything else you want to say about that?
No, just that we are organizing a web series of, it's more a technical web series around the usage of public API. The first one we are aiming to have on the 20th of August, which will basically cover the basic functionality through the public API, and it will give you a use case. The use case is pretty simple. So based on the fact that we discover a security camera on the network, and we are able to, through Domotz, we are able to take snapshot of the security camera in the same way JP is showing right now. We have developed our own script, which we release open source, and we will demoing and we will explain how we developed that script that basically collect all these snapshots on a daily basis and put on an S3 bucket on AWS, so that you can keep an history of how the camera is working every single day or something like that.
This is
just an example.
Going to be, yeah, this is really useful for service providers that want to extend their business to be able to monitor, you know, a critical part of the network actually, which is the security systems. So being able to show your clients that, hey, all these cameras that you've installed are functioning properly. It's a great revenue generating opportunity for you as a service provider, and it just provides that proactive reassurance to the customer that the systems that are deployed in their network are working properly.
Yeah, exactly. And on the same topic of public API, scripts to extract data is definitely a hot topic there. No, the second webinar will be on a way to react to events. So you get an event on the network and you react by doing some action. So it's sort of self-healing kind of tool.
Giancarlo, we are right at the 1 hour mark.
Yeah,
I think we need to close this demo out. I appreciate everybody who attended, and it looks like we got to everybody's questions, but if we didn't, I know that the team will continue to respond to those that we maybe didn't answer live. And if you have any feedback, you have any questions or things we wanted to see that we didn't cover, by all means reach out to support@domotz.com. Or if you have business related questions, happy to have you reach out to sales@domotz.com and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.